Welcome /malicious compliance. Neighbor tells Gramps he should mind his own damn business. That advice costs neighbor most of his yard and a car. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like, and one day he noticed the next door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions, so he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor is immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him, "You're new here, I've been here 10 years and to mind your own damn business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, the county comes by to check on the preserve. Gramps notices them going back and forth behind his neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out neighbor has moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer, so the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it, and it states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense, and the fine will increase for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes, so a week after that Gramps has quite the show as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. Whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs out back and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guys. He is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the yak and the toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart, so the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured neighbor would prefer him to mind his own damn business, so he decided against it. True story. In the past, I did a certain research project on federal land. Some rich guy had built a huge house next to an easement where I was supposed to access. His front yard was the easement. This was fairly rural. I had to drive a four-wheeler a couple times, thought it, and walk. I was careful, nice, and respectful. I warned him, but he was a fucking ass. The dude threw a shit fit, cops got involved, etc. He keyed my personal car and dumped cat shit on the windshield. That was the last straw. I was just some poor grad student with a shitty car. What an asshole. The federal recreation guy liked me and this pissed him off. He ruined his whole budget for the year. They did not warn the house owner at all. They took a cat in and bulldozed the whole easement though all his underground sprinklers, etc. The contractor just let them run. He was on city metered water too. After the guy shut them off they built the most beautiful 12-inch deep concrete / tied in rubber / bedded properly / drive a bulldozer on it with a fancy locked gate driveway to nothing you've ever seen. A couple times a year the federal folks go driving down it just because they can. It's seriously like a section of interstate in front of some douche's McMansion. That man really fucking hated me and the university. But he was an asshole. At first he was silent and confused, then he made the connection, and was silent and angry, but since then he's been mostly quiet and grudgingly respectful. Before and after this, Gramps has treated this neighbor with respect, and I think this guy realized his screw up was on him, not my Gramps. Let that be a lesson well learned, neighbor. There are such people as nosy neighbors, but when you have good ones that are willing to extend a helping hand, just be a cool dude and work with them. Community is more important than ever with the tragic things that continue to happen at an increasing rate. I'd love to have your grandpa as a neighbor. My so and I would totally extend food hospitality in return. We love to cook. And also watching out for his home. It doesn't cost a thing to be nice to your neighbors. In fact at my parents' old house the neighbor complained that my dad was nosy when giving some advice so when the neighbor's expansion ended up being home to a family of squirrels only visible from our side it took over a year for my father to finally tell him. The repairs didn't work and for all I know they still have a family of squirrels living in their attic. How long do they have to hold a car before it's considered abandoned and they auction it off? Kind of hoping they were able to sell his cherry sports car for a couple grand. This makes me so happy. I was recently involved in a battle with a beanbag company that wanted to buy a supposedly unused bit of land in the middle of the woods by me to build houses in the name of the company's pension scheme. We won. Fuck your Gramps' neighbor. I hope he's paid the 11 grand. We Canadians apologize for this. We have some people in our area that have extended their backyard into the park / ravine in our area. It's kind of WTF every time I walk by it but nobody comes to check. Lol, you Canadians are so gosh darn awesome. I'm only speculating here, but considering the fine was so steep, my guess is they must deal with this a lot and try to use big fines to get people's attention before they try anything like this. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.